In a stunning turn of events, former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi found herself in court facing a massive fine, only for the judge to immediately regret his decision. What happened next has left legal experts and the public completely speechless. The courtroom showdown no one saw coming. It all started when Bondi, known for her sharp legal mind and no-nonsense approach, stood before the judge in what seemed like a straightforward case. But things quickly took a shocking turn when the judge imposed a hefty fine, assuming Bondi had no defense. At first, the courtroom fell silent as Bondi took in the judge's ruling. But instead of backing down or showing frustration, she simply smirked because she knew something no one else did. Pam Bondi turns the tables. As soon as the judge delivered his decision, Bondi calmly reached for her notes and began dismantling the case with brilliant precision. She cited legal precedents that had been overlooked, exposed critical errors in the prosecution's arguments, and even pointed out a major flaw in the judge's own ruling. The entire courtroom sat stunned as Bondi delivered what can only be described as a legal masterclass. Even the judge, who moments earlier seemed completely confident in his ruling, began rethinking his decision in real time. The judge's shocking response. Realizing the gravity of his mistake, the judge had no choice but to reverse course. Not only did he withdraw the fine, but he also commended Bondi's legal brilliance, acknowledging that her argument was airtight and should have been considered from the start. Legal analysts watching the case said it was one of the most stunning reversals they had ever seen. Pam Bondi didn't just win, she completely outclassed the entire courtroom, one expert noted. The fallout, what happens next? Bondi's performance in court has since gone viral, with supporters hailing her as a true legal warrior who refuses to be silenced. Critics who once doubted her skills are now forced to admit that she's a force to be reckoned with. As for the judge, let's just say he'll probably think twice before underestimating Pam Bondi again. One thing is certain, Pam Bondi just proved why she's one of the most formidable legal minds in the country. Trump's a G. Pam Bondi, just FLIPPEDTHECRIPT on Adam Schiff, he's STUNNAD. In a jaw-dropping turn of events, former Florida Attorney General and Trump ally Pam Bondi has just shattered Adam Schiff's narrative, leaving the embattled congressman completely blindsided. Schiff, who has long positioned himself as an untouchable political force, just got hit with a devastating counterpunch, and this time, there's nowhere to hide. The takedown no one saw coming. For years, Schiff has been at the center of controversy, spinning narratives and dodging accountability. But when Bondi took the stage, she didn't just push back, she annihilated Schiff's credibility in real time. With razor-sharp legal expertise and a no-nonsense approach, she tore apart Schiff's arguments, exposing glaring contradictions and leaving his supporters scrambling for damage control. Insiders described the moment as a political earthquake, with Bondi systematically dismantling Schiff's credibility piece by piece. Her mastery of the facts, coupled with her commanding presence, left Schiff visibly shaken, a rare sight for a man used to controlling the narrative. Schiff, EUMILIATED on a national stage. As Bondi dropped bombshell after bombshell, Schiff's usual confidence vanished. Witnesses say he appeared nervous and unprepared, desperately trying to deflect, but it was too late. Bondi's takedown wasn't just a victory, it was a masterclass in political warfare. The moment quickly went viral, with clips of Bondi's brutal dismantling of Schiff spreading like wildfire across social media. Conservative commentators celebrated the moment, calling it one of the most satisfying political smackdowns in recent history. Even liberal pundits were forced to admit that Bondi's performance was a game changer. Some are now speculating whether this signals a massive shift in political momentum and whether Schiff's days as a power player are numbered. What happens next? With Bondi's stunning move reshaping the political battlefield, the big question remains, how will Schiff recover from this? Will he attempt to spin the situation, or has Pam Bondi exposed him beyond repair? One thing is certain, Schiff never saw this coming, and thanks to Pam Bondi's fearless takedown, his political future has never looked more uncertain. Stay tuned, because if this showdown is any indication, the battle is far from over. The first-class lesson that left a rich heir speechless. Rich heir mocks Pam Bondi and first class regrets it when he learns who she really is. A cocky, entitled heir thought he could mock an elegant woman in first class until he realized he had just messed with Pam Bondi, a woman who takes down the most powerful criminals for a living. It all started on a luxury flight from New York to Miami. The heir, a trust fund playboy draped in designer clothes and dripping with arrogance, rolled his eyes as Pam Bondi took her seat beside him. With a smirk, he sneered, "Did you accidentally book first class, sweetheart? I didn't know they were letting in commoners now." Passengers nearby gasped, but Bondi? She simply smiled. For the next hour, the heir bragged loudly about his wealth, mocked passengers, and assumed Bondi was just another nobody. But when a flight attendant whispered something in his ear, his smug expression instantly vanished. "Wait, Pam Bondi," he stammered, his face turning pale. Suddenly, the people around him weren't laughing with him. They were glaring at him. Pam Bondi, former Florida Attorney General, and the woman who has taken down corrupt officials, high-profile criminals, and even fought legal battles on a national stage, had just been his target of ridicule. Desperate to backtrack, the heir awkwardly tried to make small talk, but Bondi wasn't interested. Instead, she leaned in and whispered with a knowing smirk, "Next time, you might want to know who you're talking to before you run your mouth." Passengers erupted in laughter, and the once arrogant heir spent the rest of the flight silent, red-faced, and humbled. Lesson learned: money can buy a first-class ticket. The flight that taught a rich brat the ultimate lesson. Rich heir mocks Pam Bondi in first class, instantly regrets his words. It was supposed to be just another luxurious flight for one spoiled young heir, until his arrogance led him to humiliate the wrong woman. Seated in first class, the cocky, diamond-studded heir noticed Pam Bondi settling into the seat beside him. Instantly, he scoffed, nudging his friend. "This must be some kind of mistake," he sneered. "Who let the middle class in?" Passengers exchanged uncomfortable glances. Bondi simply smiled. For the first half of the flight, the heir loudly bragged about his wealth, his powerful connections, and how people like her could only dream of flying first class. Little did he know, he was sitting next to a woman who had shut down corrupt billionaires and brought down some of the most powerful figures in America. Then, a fellow passenger tapped him on the shoulder and whispered, "You do know that's Pam Bondi, right?" The heir's face drained of color. Pam Bondi, the fearless former Attorney General, a legal powerhouse who had gone toe-to-toe with some of the wealthiest and most corrupt individuals in history, was the woman he had just insulted and underestimated. Realizing his massive mistake, the heir desperately tried to make amends, fumbling over his words. I was just joking, he stammered. But the damage was done. Bondi simply smiled and said, "Enjoy the flight." For the first time in his life, the arrogant heir was at a complete loss for words. When privilege meets power, the rich heir who mocked the wrong woman, rich heir mocks Pam Bondi in first class, pays the price for his arrogance. Some people learn humility the easy way. Others get schooled at 30,000 feet. A young trust fund heir, used to getting everything handed to him, strutted into first class on a luxury flight, expecting to be the most important person there. But his attitude took a nosedive when he made the mistake of mocking the woman seated next to him, Pam Bondi. Rolling his eyes, the heir smirked. First class sure isn't what it used to be. Bondi, ever the professional, remained calm. But passengers around them sensed trouble. As the heir continued his loud, obnoxious rant, bragging about his wealth and mocking those who didn't belong, a businessman nearby couldn't take it anymore. Leaning over, he muttered, "You really don't know who that is, do you?" Confused, the heir glanced at Bondi. "And who exactly are you?" he asked with a smirk. Pam Bondi finally spoke. With a composed yet cutting tone, she said, "I'm the woman who has spent her career putting entitled criminals like you behind bars." The words hit him like a thunderbolt. Pam Bondi, the woman who had built her reputation on exposing corruption, prosecuting criminals, and standing up against the rich and powerful, was sitting right beside him. His face went pale, and the entire first-class cabin watched in amusement as the once smug heir slumped into his seat, avoiding eye contact for the rest of the flight. By the time the plane landed, one thing was clear. He had learned the most expensive lesson of his life without spending a dime. A stunning legal showdown that shook the nation. In a moment, straight out of a Hollywood thriller, former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi took the courtroom by storm, exposing one of the biggest judicial scandals in recent memory. The target? Judge Howard Gates, a once respected figure, now revealed to be at the center of a dark and corrupt conspiracy. The tension in the courtroom was palpable as Bondi, known for her fearless pursuit of justice, rose to her feet and methodically dismantled the empire of deception Judge Gates had built over the years. With a stack of irrefutable evidence in hand, she unveiled a shocking trail of bribery, case rigging, and judicial misconduct that left everyone in stunned silence. But what happened next sent shockwaves across the nation. The moment of truth, handcuffs for the judge. As Bondi dropped the final bombshell, revealing damning financial records and secret recordings, murmurs swept through the courtroom. Then BOOM. Federal agents burst through the doors, their badges glinting under the fluorescent lights. Judge Howard Gates, the man who once wielded the gavel with unchecked power, suddenly found himself on the receiving end of justice. The lead agent stepped forward and, with a voice that cut through the hushed silence, declared, "Judge Howard Gates, you are under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, and obstruction of justice." Gasps filled the air. Reporters scrambled for their cameras. The judge's face went pale as the cold metal of handcuffs snapped around his wrists. His protests were drowned out by the eruption of cheers and applause from victims who had suffered under his corrupt rule. How did he get away with it for so long? For years, Gates sat on the bench, making rulings that mysteriously favored powerful elites and well-connected criminals. Case after case, innocent people saw their lives destroyed while deep-pocketed players walked free. Whispers of corruption followed him, but no one dared to challenge his grip on the system until now. Bondi's investigation pulled back the curtain on a network of shady deals. Evidence revealed that Gates had been taking bribes from high-profile defendants, altering case outcomes, and even manipulating jury selections to serve his own interests. One particularly damning discovery? Bank records showing massive deposits into offshore accounts linked to Gates' money traced back to notorious criminal enterprises. Courtroom chaos, cheers, and outrage collide. As Gates was dragged away, the scene in the courtroom was unlike anything seen before. Victims of his rulings, families torn apart, businesses destroyed, wept tears of relief. Some shouted, "Justice at last," while others erupted in applause, knowing that their long fight for truth had finally paid off. Meanwhile, Gates' defenders, including a handful of high-powered attorneys, attempted to argue his innocence. But it was too late. The evidence was overwhelming, and the disgraced judge was headed straight for a jail cell. What's next? The fallout begins. With Gates behind bars, the legal system is now scrambling to clean up the mess he left behind. Cases he presided over are being re-examined, and whispers suggest that more arrests could be on the horizon. Pam Bondi, having once again proven herself as a relentless force for justice, has vowed to keep pushing forward. "This is only the beginning," she declared outside the courthouse. "We are rooting out corruption at every level." The nation watches as this historic case unfolds. Will others be exposed? Will more powerful figures fall? One thing is certain: this was just the first domino to drop. Stay tuned. The fight for justice is far from over. For years, Judge Howard Gates sat on the bench, wielding his power like a king. But behind the scenes, a dark web of corruption was growing, one that Pam Bondi just exposed in a stunning courtroom moment that left jaws on the floor. Leaked financial records show that Gates was secretly funneling money into offshore accounts, receiving massive payouts from corporate elites and organized crime figures in exchange for favorable rulings. Innocent people were sent to prison, while criminals walked free, all thanks to Gates' dirty deals. But Bondi's relentless pursuit of justice led to a day of reckoning. As she unveiled the evidence in court, federal agents swarmed in, arresting Gates on the spot. The once powerful judge crumbled, his reputation and freedom destroyed in an instant. Now, insiders say more names are about to be exposed. Could this be the biggest legal takedown in history? Stay tuned, the truth is only beginning to unravel. The walls of justice shook today as Pam Bondi delivered a blistering takedown of Judge Howard Gates, a man once seen as untouchable. In a courtroom packed with stunned spectators, Bondi revealed shocking evidence of Gates' corruption, bribes, case fixing, and deep connections to powerful criminal figures. Gasps filled the room as federal agents stormed in, grabbing Gates before he could even react. "You can't do this," he reportedly shouted, but it was too late. Handcuffs clicked around his wrists as the entire courtroom erupted in cheers and outrage. Victims of his rulings wept, knowing that justice had finally prevailed. With Gates facing decades in prison, the legal system is now scrambling to clean up his corrupt rulings. Who else will fall? Is this just the beginning? Stay tuned. This scandal is far from over. Introduction. In a dramatic courtroom showdown, former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi found herself in an unexpected legal battle, not as an attorney, but as the target of a judge's unprofessional behavior. However, what happened next shocked everyone present in the courtroom. Within minutes, the tables turned, and the judge who had insulted her was the one facing legal consequences. Setting the scene. It was supposed to be an ordinary legal proceeding. Bondi, known for her fierce litigation skills and relentless pursuit of justice, had been called to court for a high-profile case. The gallery was packed with reporters, lawyers, and onlookers, eager to see the case unfold. As Bondi stood in the courtroom, prepared to present her argument, Judge Marcus Reynolds, an old-school, no-nonsense judge with a controversial reputation, sat towering over the bench. But instead of maintaining professionalism, he did something that would change the course of the proceedings. The insult that started it all. As Bondi began to speak, Reynolds smirked and interrupted. Mrs. Bondi, tell me, are you here to argue law or just to pose for the cameras? Gasps filled the courtroom. The comment was not only unprofessional, but outright demeaning. Pam Bondi, a seasoned attorney who had handled some of the most challenging legal battles in the country, was not someone to be belittled. But instead of reacting with anger, she smiled calmly. Your Honor, I'm here to argue law, as I always do. I trust that this court is here for justice, not for personal attacks. The room fell silent. The tension was thick as Reynolds leaned back, clearly enjoying the power he held. Let's just get on with this, he scoffed. Bondi exposes the judge's corruption. Pam Bondi was not one to back down from injustice, and she had done her homework before entering the courtroom. She had uncovered a series of unethical practices tied to Judge Reynolds' questionable rulings, conflicts of interest, and even bribery allegations. As she continued with her case, Bondi skillfully wove in subtle references to the judge's past misconduct. The crowd began to pick up on it, and even the courtroom staff exchanged glances. Reynolds' smirk started to fade. Your Honor, Bondi said with a piercing stare, before I proceed further, I'd like to introduce new evidence that might pertain to this case and possibly others. She handed over a thick folder to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. As Reynolds flipped through the documents, his face turned pale. What is this nonsense? He barked. Just some financial records and communication logs, Bondi replied. They seem to show some rather questionable transactions linked to your rulings. The gallery erupted. The reporters began scribbling furiously, realizing that this was no longer just an ordinary court hearing, it was a full-blown expo. The arrest that shocked everyone. The judge's hands trembled as he banged his gavel. Miss Bondi, you are out of order. But before he could dismiss her findings, federal agents entered the courtroom. The lead investigator stepped forward and addressed the judge. Judge Reynolds, we have been investigating your financial dealings for some time. Thanks to new evidence provided today, we have enough to proceed with an arrest warrant. Gasps filled the courtroom once again. The judge was stunned, his arrogance now replaced with fear. You can't do this, he shouted. I am the law in this courtroom. Not anymore? the agent responded as he motioned for officers to take him into custody. As the judge was handcuffed and led away, Pam Bondi stood tall, unfazed by the chaos around her. The aftermath. News of the shocking courtroom twist spread like wildfire. Headlines across the country read, "Pam Bondi exposes corrupt judge in real time." Legal experts praised Bondi's ability to maintain composure while dismantling a corrupt figure of authority. Meanwhile, Judge Reynolds faced a long list of criminal charges, including bribery, obstruction of justice, and abuse of power. Bondi, on the other hand, continued her career, proving once again that justice prevails when the right person stands up for the truth. Conclusion. This case was more than just a legal battle. It was a reminder that corruption can exist at any level, even in the very institutions meant to uphold justice. And thanks to Pam Bondi's brilliance, a powerful but corrupt judge was finally held accountable. Justice was served. It was supposed to be just another routine flight for everyone on board. Business travelers, vacationers, and professionals filled the first-class cabin, eager to reach their destinations. Among them sat a man well-dressed, confident, and visibly enjoying the perks of first-class travel. But little did he know, his arrogance would soon lead to an embarrassing revelation. The encounter begins. As passengers settled into their seats, the man couldn't help but notice a blonde woman sitting nearby. Dressed professionally yet modestly, she carried herself with quiet confidence. However, the man seemed unimpressed and assumed she was out of place in the luxurious section of the plane. Smirking, he turned to the flight attendant and, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, joked, "I didn't know they started letting just anyone into first class these days." A few passengers chuckled awkwardly, but the woman he was referring to remained composed, offering only a polite smile in response. The mockery escalates. As the flight continued, the man made another attempt to belittle her. "You must be someone's assistant or got upgraded by mistake," he scoffed. First class is usually reserved for, important people. At this point, a few passengers began to shift uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the disrespect. But the woman remained calm, taking a sip of her drink and choosing not to engage. The flight attendants, who recognized her, exchanged knowing glances but said nothing. The moment of truth. After some time, a fellow passenger who had been observing the exchange leaned over and whispered to the man, "Do you even know who you're talking to?" The man frowned. "Should I?" The passenger chuckled before saying, "That's Pam Bondi, former Attorney General of Florida, a high-profile prosecutor, one of the toughest legal minds in the country." A stunned silence fell over the man. His face turned pale as he processed the information. The woman he had been mocking wasn't just another passenger, she was a well-respected public figure with a formidable reputation. The regret sets in. Realizing his mistake, the man awkwardly cleared his throat and tried to backtrack. I didn't mean any offense," he stammered. "I was just making conversation." Pam Bondi, ever the professional, simply smiled and replied, "It's always good to be kind. You never know who you might be sitting next to." With that, she returned to her book, leaving the man in silent humiliation as other passengers looked on. Lesson learned. By the time the flight landed, the man had learned an important lesson. Never judge someone based on appearances. The world is full of accomplished individuals who don't always flaunt their success. And most importantly, respect should be given to everyone, regardless of who they are. Pam Bondi didn't need to put the man in his place. His own ignorance had done it for him. The courtroom was filled with murmurs as former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi stood confidently before the judge. It was a high-profile case, and the opposition had already begun spinning a narrative that painted her as unprepared. The judge, known for his sharp tongue and no-nonsense demeanor, seemed skeptical as Bondi presented her arguments. With a dismissive wave of his hand, the judge interrupted her. "Miss Bondi, are you sure you're ready for this case? It seems like you're struggling to keep up with the facts." The courtroom gasped. Bondi, however, didn't flinch. Instead, she took a deep breath, smiled, and calmly flipped through her notes. "Your Honor," she said, her voice unwavering, "I appreciate your concern, but I believe the law speaks for itself. Allow me to clarify." What followed was nothing short of a legal masterclass. With razor-sharp precision, Bondi cited case law, constitutional provisions, and procedural rules that not only reinforced her argument, but completely dismantled the opposition's case. As she spoke, the judge's expression shifted from skepticism to astonishment. Within minutes, it became clear that Bondi had turned the tide. The opposing counsel struggled to counter her airtight reasoning. The judge, now leaning forward in interest, nodded slowly. "Miss Bondi," he finally said, "I stand corrected. Your argument is not only compelling, but legally sound. Proceed." The courtroom erupted into murmurs of admiration. The very same judge who had doubted her minutes earlier was now acknowledging her brilliance. As Bondi walked out of the courthouse, reporters swarmed her, eager to get a statement. She simply smiled and said, "Never underestimate preparation and the power of the law." The case went down as one of the most impressive legal victories in recent memory, proving once again why Pam Bondi is a force to be reckoned with in the courtroom. In a packed room filled with journalists and flashing cameras, former Florida Attorney General Pam Bondi stood at the podium addressing the audience. The press conference, originally meant to discuss legal policies and upcoming initiatives, took an unexpected turn when a military veteran in the audience stood up to challenge her. The confrontation. The veteran, an older gentleman with a determined yet respectful demeanor, raised his voice over the murmurs of the crowd. "Miss Bondi, you've spoken a lot about justice and the American people, but what about our veterans? Many of us are struggling, and the system often seems to forget us. What do you have to say about that?" The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Bondi, waiting for her reaction. Some expected her to deflect, while others anticipated a generic political response. Instead, what she did next left everyone in the room stunned. Her unexpected response. Rather than dismissing the veteran's concerns, Bondi stepped away from the podium and walked toward him. She extended her hand and introduced herself personally before inviting him to join her on stage. With the veteran now standing beside her, she addressed both him and the audience. "You are absolutely right. Our veterans deserve better, and no words can ever repay the sacrifices you and others have made for this country. We need action." She then turned to her staff and made an impromptu announcement. "Right now, I am pledging to work directly with veteran organizations to tackle the issues you've raised." And I'm starting today. I want to hear your story firsthand. Let's sit down after this, and let's make change happen together. The aftermath. The veteran, visibly moved, shook Bondi's hand as the crowd erupted in applause. The moment quickly went viral, with clips circulating on social media, earning praise from both her supporters and critics. Many commended her willingness to step away from political rhetoric and engage in real-time problem solving. True to her word, Bondi later met privately with the veteran, along with representatives from veteran advocacy groups, to discuss actionable solutions. Within weeks, she announced new legal initiatives aimed at improving access to health care and financial assistance for former service members. A lesson in leadership. The event became a defining moment in Bondi's career, reminding the public that leadership isn't just about policies, it's about listening, taking responsibility, and taking action when it matters most. This unexpected encounter not only reinforced her reputation as a strong leader, but also served as a powerful reminder of the importance of standing up for those who have dedicated their lives to serving the country. The courtroom was tense as Pam Bondi, the seasoned attorney and former Florida Attorney General, stood confidently before the bench. A skeptical judge, known for his sharp tongue and dismissive demeanor, made the mistake of underestimating her. What happened next left the entire courtroom stunned. The courtroom showdown. Pam Bondi had taken on high-profile cases before, but this was different. She was representing a client in a case that had gained national attention, with significant legal and political implications. As she began her arguments, the judge, an outspoken critic of Bondi's past legal and political stances, interrupted her with a condescending smirk. "Mrs. Bondi, I certainly hope you have something more substantial than political rhetoric to present today," he quipped, drawing chuckles from opposing counsel. Bondi, unfazed by the judge's sarcasm, simply smiled and continued. She laid out her case methodically, citing legal precedents with precision. Each point was backed by solid evidence, airtight logic, and an unwavering confidence that only comes from years of experience. Turning the tables. As Bondi proceeded, the judge's expression shifted from amusement to unease. He interrupted again, this time attempting to poke holes in her argument. "I fail to see how this precedent applies here, Mrs. Bondi," he said, raising an eyebrow. Without missing a beat, Bondi flipped to a marked page in her legal brief. "Your Honor, I anticipated that concern. If you refer to the ruling in Smith v. Johnson, page 14, subsection B-E, you'll see that the exact situation was considered, and the court ruled in favor of my position." The judge hesitated. He turned to his clerk, who quickly flipped through the case files. Moments later, the clerk nodded in confirmation. The courtroom fell silent. Bondi seized the moment. "Respectfully, Your Honor, legal brilliance isn't about rhetoric. It's about facts, and the facts are on my side." The unexpected applause. The judge, now visibly unsettled, shifted in his seat. He cleared his throat, trying to regain control of the moment. "Well, Mrs. Bondi, it appears you've done your homework," he muttered, finally acknowledging her expertise. Opposing counsel sat frozen, realizing their case was falling apart. A few murmurs rippled through the audience, and even some of the onlookers couldn't suppress a few impressed nods. By the time the ruling was delivered, it was clear Bondi had outmaneuvered her opponent, and the judge had no choice but to concede that she was right. Conclusion: Pam Bondi walked out of the courtroom with her head held high, having delivered a masterclass in legal strategy. The judge, who'd started the day mocking her, was left with no choice but to respect her brilliance. It was yet another example of why underestimating Pam Bondi is always a mistake.